Margaret from Margaret Knob Designs. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to get started on the tutorial for the mini album, and I'm going to be using the Farm Sweet Farm Prima collection. I will be using some of the journaling cards and some of the dots, the cardboard stickers, and some of the ephemera, and then some flowers from Prima. And this project will be done in a couple different videos. As you can see, I put the walkthrough up already, but I'm looking forward to getting this project started. So let's get going. What we're going to be doing is starting with an album that is covered in black, and I have put together this album with 8.5 by 8.5, and the spine is 2 inches by 8.5. Now, one of the things to remember is that sometimes with a spine that has been wrapped in the chipboard like this, normally if I'm going to put cardstock to layer on my covers, I'm going to be putting that probably on the spine a little bit closer. Rather than 1 7/8 for the first layer of cardstock, I'm going to put together probably a 2-inch piece of solid cardstock with 1 7/8 by 8 and 7. No, wait. This is 2 inches. 1 7/8 by 8 3/8. I'll tell you exactly when I get there, but I just wanted to warn you about that ahead of time, because this way of wrapping, I have a little bit more space to put paper on the edge of the album. Now, I wrap these ahead of time, and you can find how to put these albums together in my tutorial about creating a basic album. But the measurements you put together, as I've shown you, give you the measurements here. So let's go ahead and let's talk about what we're putting together first. So first, what we're going to do is to make the hinge for our spine. And I'm going to use this hinge project, and there's actually a tutorial about creating hinges in one of my videos before, and I will link that video to the comments below. This hinge, I cut this hinge at I believe it was 8 1/4. Let me just make sure. Yes, I cut this at 8 1/4, and I actually cut this half of an inch too big, so I'm going to give you the right measurements. It's 8 1/4 by 9.5. And the way I have this set up is I have this set up so that there's 2 inches here and 2 inches here. And at the 2-inch mark, you're going to score every ½ inch till, let me start over. Start over with the hinges. I'm so sorry. You're going to go ahead and measure to 2 inches, and then once you get to the 2 inches, you're going to also mark off 2 inches on the other end. You can flip your paper around and do 2 inches, or you can count up to the 2 inches on this end. So then you're going to score every ½ inch on here till you hit this 2-inch span. And then what we're going to do is we will come along, and you can do a couple different things. Number one, I like to use glue. And I've explained in a lot of my videos that I like to use the glue because I feel that it gets into the core of the paper as well as getting to the core of this, and it will stay a lot longer, where tape will break apart after years. So this is what I've read about and researched in my over the years. So that's why I use my art glitter glue versus using any type of score tape. I use score tape on occasion when I need a quick stick, but I do not use score tape most of the time, because I want to make sure that my projects, as much time as I put into them, I want to make sure that my projects last a long, long time. So I'm going to put this together, and then, you know, the glue is quick grabbing glue, but it does take a little bit of time, especially if there's some pressure that does happen with that. All right, so as we go along, and when we fold this, we are going to have the 2 inches on this side. You're folding every 1/2 inch as you go, and then what you're going to do is 2 inches, and then you'll have 1 inch for this spine, and then you'll break for 1/2 inch, and then you'll score here, and it'll be 1 inch because this spine will come together. This will be 1/2 inch, and then these 2 1/2 inches come together. This will be 1/2 inch, and these two come together, and then you have 2 inches on this side. So if you need more explanation than that, please, you know, take your time to go through to the other video that shows you about the different types of spines you can use in your book. And I'm just going to throw these on here because I just want to make sure they stay tight. All right, and now I'm going to come along here, and you only need to put the glue on one side. You don't need to put it on both sides of the spine, of the, well, the hinge. I shouldn't say the spine. It's really the hinge. All right. Let's go and get this other one. And we've got this one here. The other thing is that some people would like to use tape and glue. I don't use tape and glue because you're going to put your tape down first, and if your back of your tape breaks away from the spine, then your glue itself isn't necessarily going to hold the hinges together either, because the glue will come off with the glue that locks the spine together. So that's my reason for not doing it. And again, everybody has their preferences. I see many mini album makers that do it that way with score tape. Actually, if I were to say, the only score tape that I actually use is score tape for my covers, and that is for when I'm wrapping. I like the way that this gives us a nice flat, clean look, so I will use score tape on here, here, and here, but the rest I use glue for. And I actually like using the flat sheets of score tape, or double-sided tape that's in a flat sheet, and that works well for me. So what I would like to do now is to go through this, and before I put this in the book, I want to make sure that my hinges are loose. They are loose enough so that my pages can lie flat. I used for this is the black Artisan cardstock, and I love it. It's I think about 86 pounds. I wouldn't use 110-pound cardstock for my spine because I feel like it would be too thick, and meaning that it's not thick for holding the spine, but it is thick for giving the pages freedom to move. So that's why this is probably about the thickest I would go. The other thing about this Artisan cardstock, unless you have a very, very old, old sheets of this and you're working it very hard, it will not split. The only times that I've ever seen this cardstock split is when I have had a pack that I've had for a long time, and it was in a dry area, and my cardstock just really lost the moisture to it. So that's really on me. It's not on this cardstock, because this cardstock itself holds up so well, and as you can see, it works out and holds up really well for all the burnishing that I'm doing on it. So these will get even softer as we go, and they'll get used to going back and forth. I just want to make sure that I have this so that my pages will lay as flat as possible. So then what we're going to do is we're going to come along, and remember I told you I had one side that I was longer than the other. And what I'm matching up here is I made this 8 1/4, the length of that. So I want to make sure that I have about an 1/8 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch top and bottom for my hinges. And I'm just trying to center that there. And actually I'm going to turn this around because I like to look at it centering it from the top down. And I know it's very difficult to see on camera with black, and I apologize for that. After we're done doing this, then I'm going to go ahead and cut the pages that I can put into the book, and then we'll get started by putting the pages together. This is the one area that I put a lot of glue. I don't use tons of art glitter glue because it's really not good to use tons of it, and you don't need to, but this is the area where I want to make sure that I am very generous with the art glitter glue. So I am putting this, oh, I almost put it in the wrong spot. I am putting this about 1/8 inch away from the top, and about 1/8 inch, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch away from the spine, or the edges here. Trying to get this as even as possible from front to back. You know, and the other thing is that if you know that your back is going to be thicker than your front, meaning the front cover, then you can just adjust closer to one end versus the other end. I can't get this even. And this is the one thing I absolutely try to get on perfectly because of the fact that this is where your hinges start, and you want this to be perfectly down. And that's the other reason that I like to put a lot of glue on it, because it takes me a while to get this down. Now with my hinges, I've tried a couple different things. I like to have something down in between the pages most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. And I've done it before where I've cut out my paper to exactly match the hinges, and it went down and over every hinge and came out to here, and it was all one piece. And I'll tell you, it looked great. It looked great on, for sure, one of my albums. The other ones were a little bit questionable because it's really difficult to get that paper matched up. So it's just another idea. If you're better at cutting and measuring and matching things up, then I would suggest to try it on an easy album, and one that you have extra paper for, so that if you have difficulty with it, that you have the time then. All right, so I am going to go back and get my pages ready for putting together. So we have 4 pages here. So with this hinge, what we're going to need is one piece of paper that is 8 1/4 by 8 1/4, so that we have, you know, a little bit of edge around there. And then the next one is going to be 8 3/4 by 8 3/4 by 8 1/4. And on the 8 3/4, I'm sorry, it's not 8 3/4, it's 9 1/4. So it's 9 1/4 by 8 1/4. And on these 2 sides, the top and the bottom, you're going to score at 1/2 inch there, 1/2 inch at the bottom, and so that you can put that as the back page, and then the 8 1/4 glues on top of that back page. So again, our pages, one is going to be 8 1/4 by 8 1/4. The other one is going to be 9 1/4 by 8 1/4. You need 4 of these and 4 of these. So I'm going to pull out my paper, and I will show you what I'm going to do and how I'm going to put this together. And of course I ran out of my black cardstock. So I'll be back in just a minute and show you what I've got for this. Be back. All right, crafters, so I'm back. I got my black cardstock. Something that I wanted to do before we get started on putting the pages in is I want to go ahead and miter my edges on the hinge. I forgot to do that before I put them in. So I'm just going to go down. This will help to get them on a little bit easier. Can you see that? I'm just mitering. And the pieces of paper are flying everywhere, but eventually I'll find them and throw them in the garbage. Alrighty, so we've got those mitered. Then the next thing that we're going to do is I cut 4 pages that were 8 1/4 by 8 1/4, and the one side that is the top of the page or bottom of the page, one or the other, I would just take a smidge off of that, and you'll see why when we're putting this all together what I do. And then you need 4 sheets of the 9 1/4 by 8 1/4, and you don't need anything off of that. So what we're going to do, this is the 9 1/4. I have scored it at 1/2 inch on top and bottom, and then I'm going to miter these edges so that our cardstock fits together better. And I'm going to go ahead and do this one, and oh, sugar plums. Hold on, I gotta just measure this again, make sure I get the right one on the right side. Some of them I had marked and some of them I had not. And I should have marked them all. Yep, this is the top. Okay, so this is our top or bottom. And what happens is that I'm going to put, let me make sure. Oh, I got it the wrong way. So what I did is that I put this together so that it's a little bit shorter than what it needs to be, so that this easily goes into my pages. I mitered these so that when I put the cardstock on, you don't see the edges on the cardstock. So we're going to put this together, and then Also, by putting it together this way, we don't have an issue if we're going to be using pockets that there's going to be a hinge or anything standing in the way for when you're trying to put the booklet or page into the pockets. That's if you want pockets. If you don't, you can close up the end, or you can just leave it there for excess pictures or notes or journaling, whatever you would like. Okay, then let's do this side. Make sure we're even across here. I'm even here. I'm a little off on this side by 1/8 of an inch. You know, I always have sometimes issues with cutting these things. It's like no matter how hard I work to be perfectly symmetrical or structured perfect, I always have something. I'm going to pull this open because this did not lay down flat for me. All right, and when we put this into the book, we are going to put this with the hinge towards the back of our pages. So the front of our page would be clean and straight. I have a little bit here on this side. I might see if I can get that cut off, or I'll make sure that it goes into the hinge this way and it won't be seen. Okay, so that's one of our pages, and I have my other 4 pages all here. And what I'm going to do is just go along and put these pages together, and I will just speed this up. All right, so that is all of our pages are done. And I've got one that just flew on the floor here. What I'd like to do is go ahead and I will get these in just a moment. So what I'd like to do, first of all, because I want to decide whether I'm going to do double matting or not, maybe I will get these in first before the other pieces. So we're just going to finish up basically getting the pages in and also getting the matting done for my for the album, because I'm going to double mat on the covers on the front and the back. But right, so we're going to get these pages onto our mini album. And one of the things that it's going to be a little bit of a close fit, so you want to make sure that you get the pages all the way on. And if you didn't cut or miter the hinge low enough, then be sure to do that now. Just check them to make sure that there's a couple of them that I didn't miter as close to the bottom as I could have. So I'm just gonna cut those off. And if the hinge itself looks a little funky in here, it doesn't really matter because nobody's going to see what's underneath that page. I'm having a hard time with this. I should have cut these before I put them in, so it's usually easier. Sometimes it works just fine and I have no issues if I do this. But evidently tonight it wants to have issues with me. There we go. I think that's good. But as you can see, there are times that when you're doing any type of crafting, not everything's going to be perfect. And even if you've been doing it for 10 years, not everything is going to be perfect. It just isn't. We had a subscriber one time get upset with me because she's like, how come you had a mistake in your video? If you're showing me how to do it, you shouldn't have any mistakes. Well, I understand that. Nobody wants to have their time wasted, but I also am human, and not everything that I do in a video is something that I've done many times before. It's not always that way. Sometimes the things that I do are first time I've done them. And if I have a mistake, I tell you where the mistake is. And sometimes I make a mistake on things that I, have done before. It's just the way it goes. Then I go underneath here on this hinge and I put my glue up under here once I have it pressed down. And if I have to, sometimes I have to go back and add more glue. There are a lot of people that like to use score tape on their hinges. Not a huge fan of that, only because you don't get much wiggle room. So that's the reason why. And remember, each time I'm putting that to the back. And what I'd like to do is to match this up with this page. So I'd like this to be even on the bottom, have it even on the top. Right, and I try to put the glue about 3/4 of the way from the top down so that I still can lift this off a little bit from the page. And it's good to lay your pages down because it helps to lift them like about 1/8 or 1/16 away from the bottom hinge or the bottom of the hinge. And so it helps to let your pages lay flat because you're giving it some room for movement. And you're going to see as we go along, we're going to continue to set this glue all the way down on our hinges. All right, got a little stub here I'm going to have to cut off yet from my hinge that I didn't miter so well. All right, let's take this one. Let's just check it first for fit. Come on. This one I'm going to have to do a little bit of angling on for how the hinges lay in here. So we want to continue to see about 1/2 inch. If I can get this down a little bit further, I would like to, but the most important thing for me is that if I'm going to have this off down here, that I manage it from here. I might have to lift this out a little bit. So that's why I always dry fit. And it's a good thing. I don't always remember to do it, but on anything that you're doing, whether it's pockets or the designer paper, is to dry fit what you're doing, because you then get a understanding of where things are working and where things might not be working. And I'm going to line that up with the bottom. So hopefully got that. I think I'm still having an issue with this mitering. So remember that when you miter your hinges, make sure you miter them before you put them in the album. All right, that's going to help us out a little bit. And like I said, even though this is quick drying glue, I always find that if I have a little bit of leeway from the glue, all right, and let's turn this over. The other thing is I'm a bit of a messy crafter. I like to clean up after a project is done, but I'll tell you, my desk can be pretty messy until we're all the way through that project. So, all right, let's dry fit. So I apologize if any of the messiness offends you. It's just the way I work. I like to put things away at the end of what I'm working on, but if I'm working on it for a few days, you know, I may clean up if I have to, because I'm not going to get back to it for a couple of days, but otherwise we just go ahead and wing it. or I do. Some of you may have heard or know I've got a new craft room that I built, because right now my craft room is in the 1/3 of my bedroom, and it's creeping into about half of my bedroom. As any good crafter knows, it's like the supplies tend to overpower you the longer you craft. And pretty soon, I have a king-size bed, so and I'm not married, so I said pretty soon my craft supplies are going to be on the other side of the bed where I don't sleep, if I don't move into somewhere that I can have a little bit more space. The hardest thing about having a small space, unless you are a phenomenal organizer, it's hard to find things too. It's like, I know I bought that, I know I have it, but yeah, I'm not the best organizer. I'm working on it, and once I get everything into my craft room and done, it's almost done. There's still work to be done on it because of the fact of the I thought I cut enough of these. Nope, that's the outside. Do I have my pieces for the inside? Oh, maybe I didn't cut them. So what we're going to do is, I'm not going to do that with you. I will do that when we come back. Oh, that's the other thing. Oh no, I did that before. Just going to make sure this bends really well too, now that we have the hinges and the cardstock in. Don't know where that, oh, it's a little bit of glue. There we go. Okay, so there you can see we've got our hinges in. I think they look pretty good. And what we're going to do next is I'm going to do this collection with a double matting of burgundy cardstock. And I cut this. So the covers are 8 1/4 by 8, I'm sorry, 8 1/2 by 8 1/2. So this is then 8 3/8. Here, let me write this down. Oh, you can't even see that. (8 3/8) by 8 3/8 for front and back. And then the spine is, right now I have it at 2 by 8. I think I did 8 1/2. Because of the length of this. No, I did 8 3/8. I did this as 8 3/8, so 2 by 8 3/8. So let's put that on, and then the next time we get back together, we're going to work on getting the designer paper on the cover, and then I'm not going to do any more designing. I just like to get my initial pattern paper onto the cover, what I want to do, and to see what it looks like. And I will try to get a lot of that cut up so I don't have to do a lot of cutting on the video. Try to get this as even as we possibly can. And it really ends up being 1/16 of an inch away from the edges. And let's just see how this, this is, our spine is 2 inches. But see how this is 2 inches as well? So going across, I usually make it the same same width as the spine, the chipboard spine, because I feel like I get a little bit more width when I wrap my folio the way, or the album the way that I do. And the way that I wrap, you'll see in the video, is it's a method that Tamara has taught, and it's a method that she had done originally after we came back from a crafting cruise, because there were several ladies from the cruise that had some issues with their hands, so it was very hard to wrap the album. And so with the longer method, it's like one continuous piece of cardstock, or cardstock put together. And I have to tell you that that's how I used to do all my albums. And since she's shown us how to do that, or how she came up with that, I really like that method so much better. And I can tell you that I recently made a folio, and I was following somebody else's pattern, the way that they do an awesome job on their albums or folios or whatever. And they did the long way of wrapping their albums, and I didn't struggle with wrapping it. I just struggled with kind of how some of it was put together because of how I wrapped it. So if you have not seen this, please check out the tutorial for covers for the album, so that you can have an opportunity to try out this new method as well. And see, the thing that I like about it is that the whole album seems to lay really flat, and if I want to do some things on my covers, I can lay this pretty flat, and I can easily see that. So it's a very good method, and I love the way that it makes the spine look on the albums. And this method you can use for just putting it together like this, or if you want to bring some cardstock over, that still works for this. And I think that you get a really nice fit. So that is all for right now. I thank you for staying with me all this time. And the next time we get back together, we are going to work on the designer paper for here, and also the inside pieces for on this side, and as well as how we're going to set up our pages. So I will see you back the next time around. Thanks so much. Have a good night.